Good morning. We have major breaking news, major, and that is that whatever is in the Epstein files to implicate Donald Trump is so flippin' bad that he has this morning sent the FBI, yes, the Federal Bureau of Investigations, to raid John Bolton's home. Now, why is this even connected to Epstein? Well, you remember, today was the second deadline. The Congressional Committee, the House Oversight Committee, gave the Justice Department to deliver the Epstein files. They were supposed to show up on Tuesday, 3 days ago, full unredacted files, the only exception being the names of the victims. And they didn't do it. So today's the day. And what the fuck is Donald Trump doing? Another major distraction. I'm going to start there. And remember, we are having the amazing Stephanie Koff on the show as our guest at 9:30. Please stick around. There is no one better than than LB at Following the Money. Remember, she is, and I'm going to share this with you now so you know that Stephanie is the creator of the incredible World Beneath podcast. So she also is, as you know, a co-host on the 5-8 with Greg Ollier. She is coming, and I may even pop her in early if she is available, like at 9:15, because there's so much to talk about. But again, the major breaking news is that whatever is in the Epstein files, and I think we know it's really damn bad, Donald Trump is creating yet another distraction. So we ignore the fact that they missed the deadline Tuesday, and today is the day to hand over all the files, and they're not going to do it. So let me share with you first just what we've seen just on Fox News of this search. And undoubtedly, the FBI tipped them off because this isn't about law enforcement. This is about a diversion, a distraction. Let's play it now.
Looking for classified documents that they believe are in his possession. The Justice Department's top brass have all been posting on X in the last 10, 15 minutes saying no one's above the law, Congressman. I do want to get your thoughts before you go.
I fully agree. I mean, I sit on the Intel Committee. I sit on the Oversight Committee. We see classified documents all the time. And you know what? They can raid my home anytime because I don't take classified documents out of the skiff. So if John Bolton or anybody else does, you're going to be, subject to your actions. There's consequences for that.
Oh, weird. Consequences for taking classified information or even national security secrets out of the skiff and keeping them. These people were screaming bloody murder when the FBI, subject to a valid search warrant, searched Donald Trump's home. I think you remember that. Wasn't that like August of 2023, I want to say? I don't know. Do you remember? I do. Anyhow, that is what's going on. So please don't be distracted by that. What's also happening today, of course, I'm sure you saw or heard about Donald Trump's little escapade, his little pretend tough guy act of going in to join the patrols in DC to keep his eye on the crackdown, the federalization of the National Guard, the takeover of the DC police. And we know that the courts wouldn't allow, or I should say it, that the Trump administration backed off on actually installing and replacing the police chief. But we know that National Guard's been federalized and that they're patrolling places where they can be seen, not really where they are dealing with high crime rates or they're harassing people. It's one of the two. Like there aren't big crimes happening at the Lincoln Memorial, right? Where are the crimes actually happening at Union Station? If you've been through there, that's not happening there. It's a safe place. They just want to do a show of force. And before I say that it was just a game, I want to be clear. I was on last night, Dean Obedella's show with his guest host, Joe Sudbury, last night. And the first thing he asked me is what I thought about Donald Trump showing up there, trying to, make the tour, show up in the street. And I said, it's really two things. And I want to tell you what I think that is. It's an internal and it's external. Internally, Donald Trump, and we know this from hearing Mary Trump talk about it and others, Donald Trump is such a narcissist that he constantly needs his narcissist supply. But he is someone who needs, he needs to keep notching it up and up and up. This man has been president of the United States. He's in his second term. He gets to, go out and bomb countries without congressional authorization. When I say he gets to, I mean, he does, right? So how does he take it up a notch? Now he wants to play tough guy, like he is in the National Guard himself, of course, wearing a suit out on the street, right? So this is part of his internal narcissistic supply. It's his wanting to be like Kim Jong-un, where people are in like goosed up marching down the street and you see him observing them from above, right? He wants that. He wants a fascist military state, right? So that's sort of internal, his feeling. But externally, it is even much more important. Yes, his desire for constant attention and power endangers us. But what endangers us more is the piece of this that is straight out of his and the people around him, the desire to prevent another lawful election, to prevent Donald Trump from ever leaving power, right? So when he can be out there showing that he cares about and that he's in charge of troops, it's his way of practicing the possibility of filling the streets with troops, filling the streets with the Proud Boy folks that they're hiring up through ICE anytime he wants to commandeer them. And that is something we need to be concerned about. But also, of course, this is how the layers work. There's the distraction piece. Now, let me just, the other day we talked about this together. It's all of one piece. Donald Trump has always lied to get what he wants, right? And always worked. We talked about the Russia connection and LB. So Stephanie's going to do so much more than I can. But remember, Donald Trump never wants to leave office and he wanted to get into office. So what did he do? Remember, the one time he was convicted on the 34 felony counts was when he was falsifying business records. What was it? It was covering up the fact that Michael Cohen had paid off Stormy Daniels to interfere in the election. So Donald Trump did that. Why did he work with Putin? Well, because he wanted to get elected. Now, there's no evidence that he directly worked with him, but he welcomed Russia, if you're listening, right? He welcomed that. Now, I know they had meetings together. I know the Mueller report did not find so-called collusion, meaning an agreement, but we also know Russia interfered. So on Donald's side, he wants to stay in power forever. So what are the two things that help him do that? Making sure he has control of the military and they will turn against the people domestically. Of course, a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, but he'll figure out a loophole. Thank you, Supreme Court. And what is the other piece of it? He needs to not just use force, but he has to cover up his crimes, especially his connection to international child trafficking ringleader, Jeff Epstein. These are connected. So when I say, well, what he's doing with Bolton is a distraction, or the stuff in DC is a distraction, it's kind of part of the same piece. He doesn't want us to focus on the fact that there is something standing in the way of the American people finding him an acceptable candidate. But at the same time, he knows that maybe it will come out. And when it does, he will be using force against us. That's his plan. So not great. And what is the Putin side of things? We've talked about this with the Ukraine issue. Putin is using Trump because he wants all of Ukraine. I mean, they've got this symbiotic relationship. Now, let us do a couple quick more things. And then at 9:15, I'm going to bring Stephanie on and we will continue the show together. So let's listen to what Donald Trump was talking about, being Mr. Tough Guy, because he's such a weirdo.
One of the things we're going to be redoing is your parks. I'm very good at grass because I have a lot of golf courses all over the place. I know more about grass than any human being, I think, anywhere in the world. And we're going to be regrassing all of your parks, all brand new sprinkler systems, the best that you can buy, just like the Augusta. No, it'll look like Augusta. It'll look like, more importantly, Trump National Golf Club.
Okay. What an egotist. I mean, knows more about grass than anyone in the world. I'm sure that's not true. But also, Mr. I Like Grass is the same person who had the Rose Garden in the White House paved over. And grass, he doesn't want beautiful grass, natural surroundings. I mean, you know, the cherry blossoms in bloom. I mean, Washington is gorgeous. There's grass everywhere. He wants to turn it into a fucking golf course. This man is demented. Okay. Now, I think I want to actually remind you, I'm not the only person letting you know that the DC takeover is part of the distraction from Epstein, right? It helps him build his brand of being authoritarian and prepares us to get more used to troops in the street so he can use them when he needs them. But it's also, number one, timed so we don't talk about Epstein. Let me play you from, I think this is a few days ago, from late last week. This is Chris Murphy, senator from Connecticut.
Your message to people in the Capitol and elsewhere who buy into this argument that President Trump is making, that these cities are unsafe in part because of Democratic policies.
Well, first, let's just look at the actual numbers. In Washington, D.C. and all across the country, crime was going up during Donald Trump's first term. And when Joe Biden became president, crime started to come down. In fact, it's been coming down precipitously in Washington and in cities all across the country. So it's just not true, the allegation that they are making. What's happening here in Washington, D.C. is just a stunt. Donald Trump didn't like the fact that the walls were closing in on him, that his own base was questioning why he wouldn't release the Epstein files, why he was protecting very powerful people. He didn't want to talk anymore about the fact that our healthcare system is about to collapse because of the cuts that they have made, that premiums are going to go up by 75% on Americans. And so, true to form, he just decided to create a new news cycle. Nothing different is really happening in the United States Capitol today. Crime will continue to go down, whether or not there are U.S. Troops here, National Guard troops here. He's just trying to distract from the stories he doesn't want Americans to be talking about.
Okay. And I know you might be thinking, not you, but someone you share this program with, that you say, listen to, Jen Taub Live, and they're going to say to me, hi, thanks for watching for the first time. They're going to say, yeah, but that's Chris Murphy. That's politics. You're not going to believe who also agrees with that crime is down. Watch this. This is compiled by CNN. Watch the whole thing.
Capital City has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged out maniacs and homeless people. And we're not going to let it happen anymore. We're not going to take it. No.
Okay, so that was Donald Trump in May. Okay, let's go. I mean, Donald Trump today. Okay, let's keep listening. We're going to hear him in May.
Oh, Eddie's very talented. Crime is down in Washington, D.C. Street crime, violent crime by 25%. And people have seen, they've noticed a big difference.
And the murder rates are plummeting. We are now able to report that the murder rate is on track to be the lowest in U.S. history, in modern recorded U.S. history, thanks to this team behind me and President Trump's.
Okay. So who's lying? Donald Trump in May or Donald Trump today with Kash Patel? Why not both? And with that, I am going to bring my dear friend, Stephanie Koff, who I greatly admire for her brilliance, creativity, and her willingness to show up so early on my program. Welcome.
Hi, Jen.
Hi, Stephanie.
Audience,
How are
I'm
you?
showing up very early, but also, how do you get your hair? I couldn't get my hair together in time for your program, so I apologize. I'm not as.
You should have seen my hair yesterday.
Yeah.
I was touching it because it was a mess. And yeah, today I made a little bit of effort, Stephanie,
Oh
for you.
my goodness! Thank
But you always look gorgeous, honey. And
Oh.
it's about the
I wasn't
world
fishing.
to
I
me.
promise. I just feel like the early morning is sort of like, okay, And I'm an early bird, but I don't get myself together until after I work out, go to the gym, take my shower there. So anyway, here I am. I'm happy to be with you this morning. I'm privileged to be on your show. And I was enjoying everything you were pointing out.
Thank you. I mean, we can, you are my guest, and I know that you have recently been doing some, sort of focus spotlights on the money trail. And you've done that with your co-host, Greg. And I want to sort of open the floor to you to talk with us, assuming, I know some of the people who've demanded, let's get, LB on. They know what what you've talked about, but most people here might be new to your work. And I would invite you to share what what you can share with us about the, Epstein money story and the Trump money story and how that helps illuminate whether we will get to the truth or whatever you'd like.
Oh, okay. I'll give a little background to begin with. So I'm a writer, I'm a screenwriter, and I write podcasts, but, was doing that. Now I'm back into the screenwriting and doing a little bit other kind of creative stuff. But I've been, I came into sort of speaking out against this man who was running for president in 2015 and has sort of been haunting our lives ever since. It kind of stepped away from, and not really away from my work, but stepped into doing more. It was really became driven to expose him because I knew a little bit of information because of the world that I was working in about Donald and his money problems. I had been privy to information in 2005, all the way back into 2005 from people that knew him very well and were powerful people in the entertainment industry that I also knew that were talking about his money problems back then. And it's been since reported about quite a bit, that he couldn't get any bank loans. He couldn't get any it was a terrible, terrible moment for him, right when he was on The Apprentice and sort of this new show was out. And the producers of that and the people involved in it were panicked because he was about to go bankrupt in front of the world when they had just promoted him up as this big billionaire.
Oh my gosh.
That's how I had heard about that. He, where was he going to get this money? And that he was in debt to some Russians. So, and then Eric Trump talked about that, infamously. And then, we learned about the Deutsche Bank stuff. And we learned about that, there was a lot of reporting that he was during that time period. And I think a time period before that as well, really facing financial ruin because his debts were astronomical, which is when the Russians sort of came in. And by Russians, I mean very specifically a man named Semyon Mogilevich, and who helped install Putin back in 2000 initially as well, and was number 2 wanted on the FBI list. Robert Mueller had spoken about him quite a bit after 9/11, and Osama bin Laden was sort of in this guy's network. So he's was known at the time 20, 30 years ago as head of the Russian mafia, at least the Soltneskaya Bratva, which means mafia, that was in Moscow. So
can I ask, with this guy, you're saying sort of even before Perestroika, this was a Russian mobster who then became an oligarch. Is that kind of what we're getting at? Or
he kind of became an oligarch. I mean, it was like he would have this front and facade that he was this Russian businessman. He was Robert Maxwell's business partner.
Oh, stop it.
It's true. It's true. It's true. So,
okay, sorry. Keep going.
There's a book by Robert Friedman that everybody should read called Red Mafia, and it talks about Mogilevich in there. And then there was an FBI former FBI agent who then worked in the private sector, named Bob Levinson, who was known as the Mogilevich Whisperer, in that he was sort of front and center and foremost at tracking down Russian organized crime in New York City, where everybody was focused on LCN, La Cosa Nostra, our 5 families. Levinson, who was working that, I can't remember what crime family he was on, because all the different FBI agents would be on different crime families, again being known as the, blah blah blah. So those 5 families. So that's my work, by the way. So you referenced The World Beneath. That's sort of the work that I do, is really getting into the nuts and bolts of how organized crime in the United States formed, and specifically the intersection between organized crime and intelligence services, U.S. intelligence services. So that there's a deep intersection there. There's incredible people and incredible heroes that helped form the NSA, a woman also by the name of Friedman, Elizabeth Friedman. So all
By
of
the
that.
way, let me stop you for 1 second.
Yeah.
You guys, this podcast series, The World Beneath, blew my mind. And I probably have to listen to it again because not only is it fascinating, these deep dives into someone like Elizabeth Friedman and this code cracker person and the connection with Shakespeare, et cetera, but that if I listen to it again, I'm going to go, oh my God, why did I forget that? It's so rich. And Stephanie knows everything. Continue.
Okay.
Honey.
Yeah. And just to know about that podcast, it's an alternating, we try to format with it, which I don't know that I would continue going forward, but because it's so dense in the information, I'd launch a narrative episode. And then the next episode, I sit down with an expert to talk about that episode. So what we eventually build to, and you'll remember my last guest was Andy McCabe.
Right.
Because Andy McCabe actually worked the Russian organized crime beat in New York City during the time when Donald Trump was laundering the money for Semyon Mogilevich. Okay. Which is why he was sort of right in Donald's sights there. Right. And so what the big takeaway and what we build to and the story that I'm telling with that, with reference to Donald, is to understand that what happened in the 80s and the 90s in New York City specifically, but throughout the Eastern Seaboard and also in Chicago and all the way over to Los Angeles, is the reason we stopped hearing about our gangsters is not because Rudy Giuliani put away, the concrete cartel and as that story goes. He did prosecute them when he was head of New York, but it's that the Russian mafia rolled in and rolled up our crime families, specifically the Genovese and the, that was sort of the big one. They came in and infiltrated us from the underworld up.
And this is how we get back to the 2005 with Trump, but go ahead. Yeah,
that's exactly right. What do you get when you come in and you roll up crime families? Well, you get their rackets, but you also get their assets.
Okay.
So this work of mine started with, because I had that information on Donald Trump and I started looking, what is this? Why is there Russian money? What is going on? What's happening? I really didn't know. But I started sort of in the money lane. And when you start looking at him and pulling apart his story and the actual facts about him, about Fred Trump, about Drumpf, the grandfather, when you start really pulling on that, what you find is a crime story. What you find is this is a family, the Trump family, starting with his grandfather, who was business partners with Meyer Lansky, Lucky Luciano. You start pulling on it, and you get our American gangsters and our American crime families. And then you track all of that up into the time of when Fred was really doing stuff with Roy Cohn, with Tony Salerno, with Castellano, who was head of the Gambinos. You start to see that what was happening right at the time that Donald was coming in and kind of stepping into Fred's shoes, and Fred was the business front for those crime families, is that the Russians were also coming into our shores and rolling up the crime families, and they just took the Trumps with them. That was an asset that they just rolled up and took with them. So that I got confirmation from Andy McCabe for the piece of that yes, the Russians did come in after the Soviet Union collapsed. There was and before it, but while they knew it was kind of this, probably the communist era is over and the oligarch era would begin. There was a tremendous amount of money, of flight capital out of the former Soviet Union that needed to be pushed through, right?
Right.
And laundered through. And the trick is that this is not necessarily illegal. I'm not accusing.
Right. And Joe Stiglitz writes about this, right? Like there's this sort of privatization and a chunk of money. Where are they going to invest it? Right.
They needed vehicles and things to push it through, and they had assets at hand that they had gotten from rolling up the crime families.
Oh my God.
So that's that's all of that was happening at the same time. And then you had Mogilevich's partner in Robert Maxwell. What they were setting up were not just businesses, but visa programs coming from the Soviet Union through Israel into the United States. So you had a lot of Jewish families seeking to flee the Soviet Union in the era of the gulags right before the collapse. And Israel was the pathway that the United States had worked out for those families to come through. But what you had to do to get out of the Soviet Union before the collapse and land on the U.S. shores, of which a lot of people did, was you had to sign a thing with the KGB at the time saying, we will be your assets. We will always be there for you. Right. And then people just used that so they could get the hell out. They got their Israeli passports and they landed basically in Fred Trump's territory. You know, they landed there in Manhattan, a lot of folks, and then just abandoned all of the promises because they made it out. Right. So that's really what was happening. But it was Robert Maxwell and Mogilevich who ran scams and ran, bullshit companies and had like stock exchange things. And this gets us to.
But why did Maxwell bother doing the newspaper thing? Was it just another asset for him?
I think it's just a media. You always see these sort of gangsters and these intelligence assets with, everybody should read the biography on Robert Maxwell. It's called, it's got a catchy name called Super Spy, but the two men who wrote that biography did a lot of deep dives, and their prime source for that was a guy named Ari Ben Menashe, who is kind of controversial. Yeah, but he knew a lot because he's the one who confirmed that Robert Maxwell introduced Jeffrey Epstein to him while Robert Maxwell was working for Israeli intelligence services.
Got it. So that's the connection. So I love this story. This is sort of roll up the the Russians are rolling up the Italian mob in the U.S. And then they also have a ton of money coming out of the now Russia, the former Soviet Union. And then they roll up Fred Trump and Donald.
Yeah, they rolled up the Genovese and the Gambino crime families. There was a guy that was kind of posing as a rabbi, but he was a Soviet Greenwald, Rabbi Greenwald. And he was cutting deals with Giuliani about his best friend, who was at that time considered, this was the 70s and 80s, the head of the Russian mafia, or one of the big sort of mafioso that had come through that program, landed in Coney Island and was sort of building everything. So I write about him in the World Beneath because he's killed, and he's one of our dead bodies that we start the story with.
And let me just pause for 1 second for folks like, Stephanie has so much more pulled together and in her mind. But if you're thinking, wow, this is the first time you've heard of it, maybe some of you're not. Like someone says this, right? Evelyn says this at the Trump Tower building, right? How did he get the concrete in? Who got the apartments there? And I've written about, and Stephanie will tell you about that. But this is stuff that's been written about. So when I'm nodding here, it's because some stuff I know, but when I'm like, holy shit, it's like, oh my God, I'd forgotten that, or she's drawing the connection. Do you want to talk about the evidence that he was mobbed up when he built Trump Tower? Go ahead.
Oh yeah. Okay. So, so the concrete cartel, it was a term that the FBI gave, and maybe the press came in on that a little bit. The five families, when it came to bid rigging in New York City for the concrete, right? So Manhattan didn't look like it does now. Modern Manhattan back in the 70s, all these skyscrapers, all this development, there was a tremendous amount of development that happened. And Roy Cohn really helped with the building commissions and all these things in New York City that you have to sort of, pass by to get there. All these construction companies would put a bid in, and then the commission would the building commission would say, okay, we're going to grant these bids, these particular projects to this company, to that company, to this company. And so you had to have a company that could handle the concrete. There's unions involved. It's a complex business venture. But the thing to just know is companies would put in, we want the project is happening. We want the bid. And then one company within the group that was selected would get the bid. What was discovered is that was actually cartel work. So between the five families. So the heads of the five families would meet They're the ones that had all of those companies. There was one called S&L Concrete that got a lot of loans. That was, and where everybody thought, okay, there's territory, right? There's Gambino territory. There's, these different mafia have their own territory and they don't cross lines or we get a mob war. And everybody understands that from all the mafia movies, that there's territory, right? And they control. Well, what we discovered is they were actually joined together around these concrete bids. So there was a commission on the mafia side where they were putting companies together. And that started, Roy Cohn was the one that brokered a lot of those agreements. And the big one was between the Genovese crime family, which was Fat Tony Salerno, and the Gambino crime family, which was Castellano. He was my other dead body at the beginning of The World Beneath. Along with the Russian gangster, they were killed just right apart. Those two crime families chose to work together around a company and came together around a company called SNL, right? Mm-hmm. And SNL was the concrete company that built Trump Tower and built all the Trump properties. So they would get the big bids. That's what started getting pulled apart. So if you remember, there's a guy, he's still alive. He won't talk to me. He's like weird with me because I was trying to talk to him a little bit and he stays away. He's still very much in Donald Trump's camp. But Sammy the Bold Gravano, who was the lieutenant underneath, supposedly the second guy underneath, oh God, now why his name, this is my menopause. The names go right out. Who's the big gangster that everybody knows? That went to prison for murder.
Who wore a bathrobe?
No. That's not Vinny the Chin. Not the one that wore the bathrobe, but the one that John Gotti.
John Gotti and John Gotti Jr. got out. Yeah.
How John Gotti and Sammy Gravano came to take over the Gambino crime family is they murdered Paul Castellano, who was the head of the crime family. Before they did that, Castellano was part of the commission. They're part of the commission of figuring out how they were going to divide up Manhattan for money-wise to build all of these things. So Trump Tower was the sort of brainchild of S&L Concrete and was the coming together of those two crime families as brokered by Roy Cohn and Fred Trump.
Right.
All of this work was done by Wayne Barrett. So you can read Wayne Barrett's journalism on Trump and Giuliani, and he's written books about them both. He passed away.
The late journalist Wayne Barrett, and that's who David K. Johnson knew well. Yep.
Incredible. So he really was the expert. He dug into all the files and pulled all this apart from the court documents and from his own reporting and sources that he had. Yeah. So the S&L Concrete, there was basically the FBI had all these recordings. So the FBI got in there to try to take down the concrete cartel, which they did successfully. They started recording the gangsters and they were able to get a recording in Paul Castellano's home. So they worked through like the maid and they got in there. They came in, they said they were fixing the TVs and they worked with the NSA actually at the time to have very sophisticated surveillance tech and recording technology. Got in there. I think there was even something with the microwave. They kept going in to repair the electronics and do stuff, and they got all this stuff. So they have all this on tape. And they also were at one of the clubs that was Gotti's club, his guys and Gravano, and they were the Fish and Game Club. They were able to get a microphone in there. And the name that kept coming up over and over and over again on these FBI tapes is Donald Trump. Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. Do we have a Donald Trump deal? Because Trump became synonymous with them of a level of deal, a bid that you had to get the commission to sign off on. So the lieutenants were out there getting their own, putting their own companies up for bids, getting deals. They didn't have to pass that through the commission if it was under $2 million construction project. They could just do it on their own, make their money, pay their tribute, pay their guys, and move on to the next project. But if it was $2 million or more, it had to go through the commission. Okay. So the commission would decide on that. And that was known as the Donald Trump deal. Is it a Donald Trump, Mr. Deal Maker? It was just mafia.
So it becomes a size. It's like the threshold for what it's like, almost like a legit business. Like if it's above this amount, you need senior authorization.
You have to get the commission to sign off on it. Right.
And that was the, shorthand. Is it a Donald Trump size deal? Yeah.
That's right. And then they would decide in the commission whose sort of turn it was. Right. And that all came to be known because of that SNL concrete. So that's
amazing.
So then you have to go.
That's the 90s, though, right? That was built in the early 90s.
This is 80s.
Oh, right. The 80s Trump Tower is built.
This is the 80s, the 70s and 80s, Jen.
Okay, shit. Okay. I forgot when that was on this.
Yes. Yes. This is
I think I have my slideshow with that. Yeah.
Because Donald wanted to build in Manhattan. And that was, as he says, he's on tape recorded saying, I wanted to build in Manhattan, but my dad said that's not our territory. So he's saying this.
Holy shit.
That's what he means. It was Gambino territory. They had to have Castellano sign a deal, sign off on it with Tony Salerno, right? Because they were Genovese. Fred was the front for the Genovese crime family. That's the territory that he was building all of his multi-unit family housing in.
Right. Okay, I got you. So the 80s, because Donald goes into the business in the 70s with his dad, and that's when they get hit with the discrimination lawsuit.
Right.
Then in the 80s, he's doing Trump Tower. It's the 90s when the casinos start to happen.
He wanted to be in Manhattan. He wanted to be a Manhattan guy. That's
not
why
Queens. It wasn't as classy.
Yeah, exactly. That. He wanted to be there. He didn't want to be out in, Queens and Brooklyn. Right. No, he wanted to be.
And he didn't just want apartment buildings. He wanted towers and business. He wanted glamour. Yeah,
he wanted a palace. He still wants it. He still wants everybody to fawn over him, right? He needed the ego thing. So his dad and Roy Cohn worked it out for him. And then his name is the name that keeps going on these FBI tapes. So what you have to do is say, okay, is it reasonable to believe that the FBI has this guy's name on all of the recordings at all of these different locations where they're discussing the concrete cartel, the very criminals they're going after and the operation they're going after, and they wouldn't sit down and talk to him? You think he didn't get a tap on the shoulder?
Of course. I mean, this is the man who learned never to write anything down.
Right.
He doesn't use his own email. I mean, come on. He learned all this shit from Roy Cohn in that world. Yes.
So it's very, very, very reasonable to believe that he brokered some type of deal for himself to get out with Rudy to not become part of this
crackdown. So he was loosely a mob asset. I mean, we think of him as a mob boss, but he was more of a mob.
He was property. He was the maid.
Oh,
he laundered the money. He was the laundry maid.
Right. And there were all those cash purchases of apartments in Trump Tower, the gambling ring going on there. You know this stuff. Okay.
Yeah. So then go to Wayne Barrett's work. He talks about a guy named John Cody, who was head of a particular union. And they all of these people went down. They all went to prison. They all got taken down. But somehow the guy that the whole fucking thing is named after skates away scot-free.
So can you bring this forward? So let's go back to the 2005 moment when you discover through your Hollywood connections that Donald is once again broke. And they don't want, after they put the shit ton of money into The Apprentice, to make it look like the guy they've pretended is the really smart businessman is broke. I mean,
I don't know about
and somehow get this to Epstein. I can't decide, Stephanie. Should we get
trouble? Needed money, and the banks wouldn't loan him money. I don't know I only know what I heard, and that's what I heard. Yeah.
How do we, so that's 2005. And by this time, this is right around the time he has his breakup with Jeff Epstein, that fight over that mansion they both wanted. But this is also right around the time when Epstein's getting busted. You can tell me, because I've talked about what you said. So I'm trying to understand, because when you throw the name like Maxwell around, and we know that, because I want to bring together and have everyone's mind blown the sort of spy, gangster, Epstein, Trump connection around this, because so I just want to show you this picture here. This is 1989. when Donald goes to this party on Maxwell's yacht.
Yeah.
So he obviously knew him. And then there's
Go
also
back to that for a second.
Oh, okay, I got you. Hold on.
Go back
I got
to
a
that.
whole. I'm going on. Okay, here we go.
All right. Do you see everybody there? There was John Tower, former senator and thumb down defense secretary.
Yeah.
So John Tower was in charge of, it had a program. It was a software program that basically was a precursor to the internet, if not the very basis of what allowed network communication. It was called Promise Software. And Promise Software, the people who developed it were in a struggle for years and years and years to kind of get control back from Department of Justice. It's a software program the Department of Justice started using. Well, John Tower was also part and parcel to that Promise Software, and he was allowing private businessmen and other sort of people in other territories to take the license of it and bring it into new territories. And Robert Maxwell was the person that had access to that and had that software. Consequently, his other daughter, Isabel Maxwell, was like Netscape, right? Like started all this, I think it was Netscape or some other kind of beginning internet search browser type of thing. So that family had always been involved in this sort of, and interested in this sort of the early softwares that would allow network communication.
Right.
What we know about Promise is it had a backdoor that no matter who was using it, you could kind of see to what was going on in whoever was using it. And for us, it was our Department of Justice, our Justice Department, with things like cases against criminals, confidential informants, like all in this sort of database.
It's cool. I just looked this up. Is a search engine Magellan? Holy shit. Okay.
Yeah, Magellan. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
wow. Okay.
So that's just like everybody keep that in your mind's eye, because I think that's going to become important later on. There's all these conspiracies around it because there's a lot of dead bodies that followed the Promise stuff. Who knows? I don't want to engage in conspiracies. I like the stuff that I can find in court documents. I like the stuff I can find in the offshore leaks database. I like all of these things. But just keep that check, because I think that the Epstein.
And so that's why he was there. So in '89, when there's this big party on the Ghislaine yacht, this is why these people are there. Okay, got it.
Right. And then Donald Trump, who has a much bigger yacht, the much bigger yacht that Donald Trump had was Adnan Khashoggi's yacht.
Well, what Stephanie's talking about is in this piece, someone said why, Donald has a bigger yacht, and he had Khashoggi's yacht then.
He had Khashoggi's yacht. Yeah.
Okay.
And Khashoggi was an arms dealer for the Soviet Union. And at the moment that he passed, he was the wealthiest man in the world. So at the time, and Ivana Trump's like best friend, she loved him.
Right.
And also somebody who did business with Robert Maxwell, and also someone whose money was pushed through something called Towers Financial, which was the biggest.
Oh my God.
Yes, there you go. There's your oh my God moment, which was the biggest Ponzi scheme, and if not kind of the original big Ponzi scheme prior to Bernie Madoff. And Towers Financial was created by Jeffrey Epstein.
This is why my mind, Stephanie can see that she's about to say something else and it's clicking. Holy fuck. Okay. So people, Stephanie, so the trouble is you're a fucking genius.
And the lawyer for Towers Financial was Rudy Giuliani.
Okay, go ahead.
The lawyer for Towers Financial was Rudy Giuliani.
I need to repeat and unpack what the fuck you just said, because while my mind was being blown, all the circuits are like smoking. So what you're saying is the guy, I'm just going to sometimes let's anchor it in a picture. There was a party on a yacht in 1989 that Robert Maxwell had. At this party, Ghislaine was there, Donald was there, and so was this guy, John Tower. John Tower had a financial company called Tower Financial.
No. Different Tower.
No.
I don't know if they named it. I don't know. Different Tower.
Okay, separate. Okay, so
John
separate
Tower's
from that.
Ex-senator, whatever, he had the Promise software.
John Tower had the Promise software that is really good at networking things together. And therefore,
it was the beginning of the internet, basically. The Justice Department needed a way for a software program, some kind of way for what at the time everybody had these closed networks for their different divisions of justice
to break through, right? To break
and
through.
They wanted that to be able to talk to one another so they could find, for criminal cases, so that they could track stuff. And that was a software that allowed what was closed networks to all of a sudden become
and this is before
open network communication. Yeah.
So this is before Al Gore invented the internet. Okay.
That's
so
before I think that's why Al Gore said he invented the internet, is because he knows what this world is software.
So let me go back though. So the tower, help me thread this. Who were the people was it Khashoggi? Who were the people who were connected besides Jeff Epstein? Was Maxwell connected to Tower Inc.? I'm trying to find that.
Towers Financial.
Tower Financial.
Yes, he'd already been, as Ghislaine said, he was murdered off the side of his yacht, but we don't know if he was murdered or if he fell off the side of his yacht and drowned, whatever. He was already dead by the time this was starting. And no one knows what happened to all of his money, even though he was going through tremendous legal trouble.
Yes,
which is media.
He owed a lot of money to people.
There was lawsuits. He had lost a lot of money. There was still an enormous sum of money that nobody could find that had gone missing.
Exactly.
And this is money that Robert Maxwell was entrusted to keep. And this is, again, in the biographies and in its actual fact. There was this huge, almost $1 billion that the United States and shouldn't have been passing through. They passed through Israel to get to funding. There was a war happening in Iran, and there was money needed for the weapons that Iran had. They had some U.S. weapons, and they wanted to use this in the war. And it was the parts were needed to replace. There was money that needed to help with the weapons, and but we couldn't be seen doing anything with them. And Israel really wanted this war at that time. They were going to benefit from Iran coming out ahead in the war. So a deal was cut, and it was like, you can go ahead and help fund what's going on in Iran. We'll pass that money through Israel. And the person who was responsible for the Israeli government of kind of guarding that money, this is why it matters that Mogilevich was his business partner, was Robert Maxwell. That money and that scandal and it sort of being discovered and found that this was happening is what became known as Iran-Contra.
Right.
Okay.
That's what
Maxwell's at the heart of all of that. Now, we don't know where all this huge sums of money came from to initially fund Towers Financial. It's sort of, we do know Adnan Khashoggi was in there. With his money, we know Tom Barrack had a part in a lot of that.
Okay.
And Towers, but we don't.
So why Epstein? Let's stop there, because this is when Epstein. This is why I want to draw this. So we know that Epstein was. We don't know where the money came from, but he suddenly was doing this. And so I just want to put this picture here.
Yeah.
This is 1974 to 76. Epstein's like 21. He's college dropout. He gets this job, as you know, at Dalton, and then he leaves. He leaves from there, and as you know, goes to Bear Stearns. Gets kind of pushed out, and then he's at Towers Financial.
I'm going to fill in the gap.
Oh, stop!
I'm going to fill in the gap for you. You want me to?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, yes, he was like a teacher, tutor, and then all of a sudden, boom! He's at Bear Stearns, right underneath Ace Greenberg. Ace Greenberg ran Bear Stearns. So, and Jeffrey Epstein apparently tutored Ace's daughter. So that's how at Dalton, that's how they kind of knew of one another, something like that, or somehow they knew each other through the kids. And Jeffrey gets this big promotion. Now, while at Bear Stearns, he came into private wealth management at Bear Stearns, and he came in at a very senior level. Never happens. He didn't matriculate up. He just landed this position, and there was reporting
because of Greenberg.
Because of Ace. And there was reporting that caused some consternation within Bear Stearns, but what are you going to do? This is Ace's boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
The client that Jeffrey was given by Ace to start with is a guy named Edgar Bronfman. The Bronfman family. Okay.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No. So Edgar
Bronfman
was part of that sort of helping Russia at the collapse of the Soviet Union establish itself as a capitalist nation, and a lot of flight capital, little weird things. But who he was before that sort of got him that position is he's Sam Bronfman's son, and Sam Bronfman is a big liquor baron, Seagram's Liquor. These are Canadians, and Sam Bronfman was Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano's business partner. There you go. So this is a crime story. I keep coming back to it. It's not it's the same racket over and over again. It's the same people over and over again.
So
It just
somehow
keeps happening.
Epstein has this high level client.
So he's given a high level client, and he runs afoul with the SEC. So he's doing shit that the SEC kind of comes knocking on Bear Stearns about.
Right.
And there's warnings and there's stuff, and Ace is still protecting Jeffrey Epstein. And this is right at the exact same time. If you read Wayne Barrett's work, it's very important that Ace Greenberg was figuring out very risky, very tricky. He personally was doing all of this creating strange instruments, taking all these huge risks with Bear Stearns money to fund who? Donald Trump.
This is
and
insane.
The casinos, because the casinos were starting to happen at this time. And so Ace and Donald, we even talked about it. He's like my accountant. He's my own personal. The only person that Ace was actually personally attending to as a client was Donald Trump. And he's protecting Jeffrey Epstein, his little protege. So you do the math of whether you think these guys met long before they say they met down in Palm Beach.
Right.
So now we've got this time period where Ace has to finally capitulate and get rid of Jeffrey Epstein in order to protect Bear Stearns from the SEC. And that's the deal he cuts with the SEC. Okay, we'll stop this guy.
Yep.
What I discovered was Jeffrey Epstein didn't leave Bear Stearns. Jeffrey Epstein started doing offshores. So that's when his first offshores and his big offshore tax havens and the business that he was running that brought in Wexner and all of this stuff, right at the time he was creating Towers Financial. Leaves Bear Stearns, not really. How can I say that? Well, I went into the offshore leaks database. I found Jeffrey Epstein's offshores. These are public. Everybody can go and look at them. You can know about them. It's been written about them, but nobody went and looked at who else is on there in these offshores. Who are the managing directors? Who are the people with Jeffrey Epstein? Who are those names? And the people in there are Ace Greenberg's partners at Bear Stearns.
So they do this spinoff. So they're private clients. This is how it works. I'm going to run money for you, but when you make it, we have this other guy, technically off the books, who can not launder, but help you evade taxes through these offshore networks. Okay,
and we know this part. That's important. So he's evading taxes with these. He's helping big
rich
clients
guys,
evade their taxes.
Wexner,
Leon
Black.
Right. You don't know where any of the money's coming from.
Right.
Jeffrey Epstein at this point in time was also running all over Russia with Esther Dyson. Not too much later. So he's he's with Ghislaine, whose dad was known to be all the Iran-Contra money's gone. And Robert Maxwell, he's dead, but he was known to be and reported to be a Mossad agent, but also working with the KGB. So before the Soviet Union collapsed. So this is the network. This is why I say it's like, woo, what's going on? We have intelligence service. I don't necessarily mean U.S. intelligence, and organized crime kind of intersecting here. Right. So
it just so happens. So here's the thing. This all makes sense because this is how my mind works. And I can follow what you're saying, because, 75% of it I knew. You're filling in the 25 that either I forgot or, and I didn't. But what I'm having a hard time getting is it just so happens that Jeff Epstein is a pedophile. So he is able to fund his own sick stuff that he's doing to abuse children. But then he wraps everyone else in it to have dirt on them. Is that how? And that's where more money comes from. I mean, this is the piece I don't get how it happens with this.
This is the piece that if you go to, again, the guy who was who gave all the former intelligence officer who talked a lot about Robert Maxwell and exposed a lot of stuff for those two journalists who wrote the biography on Robert Maxwell, a guy named Ari Ben-Menashe. So what Ben Menashe has said publicly since then is that Jeffrey was working as sort of this rogue intelligence asset, right? There's a whole, if you remember what Tom Barrack was indicted for and then got out of, right?
And people might want to remember that remind people who Tom Barrack is.
Tom Barrack is, he's a a money guy, and he was one of the big backers of Donald Trump's first term.
Right.
And then he does a lot with the Middle East. He does a lot with all different. They're called like sort of royal wealth funds, right? For the
sovereign wealth funds,
sovereign wealth funds, and so and then that's a legitimate business. He's like a legitimate business guy. He does this. This is international money. A lot of it is over my head. It's your world. It looks shady and gross, and it's like but it's not necessarily illegal. You have like someone like Anand Khashoggi, who we knew was doing all this arms dealing, was the number one arms dealer. That sounds scary and it sounds illegal. It's not, it's a business.
Although, I mean, some of it can be like,
it can be,
right, the sovereign wealth fund where Jolo and was involved with the mob and DiCaprio, that was illegal, but that's another story.
But what you can't do, what you can't do if you're working with foreign, especially intelligence services or sovereign wealth funds or nations, if you're working as their agent, you have to register. You have to, in the United States, you have to say, I'm working on behalf of this other nation. So when you get into certain lines of work, if you're in media, you have to do that. If you're in, if you're dealing arms, you better, there's stuff. So Tom Barrack was, when he was indicted and arrested, and then got out of it, it was for being an unregistered foreign agent.
Got it.
Because he was doing, they found out that the Justice Department found out that he was doing work with these other nations without registering. If we prosecuted that crime as seriously as we need to prosecute it, it would have ended a lot of people that we see running around our government.
Well, Mike Flynn got pardoned because of that shit, but yes. Okay.
Yeah.
It's Tom Barrack, it goes away. Did Donald pardon him? Is that what happened? Or I can't remember.
No. Merrick Garland kind of failed, big shocker.
Okay. Don't press that button. Don't press that nerve with me. Okay. So
I'm just saying,
from here.
I know. He has good lawyers,
okay, so let's get back. You've explained who Barrack is, and so.
But I'm going to answer your question. So
got it.
In that world where you're trying to understand Epstein, it's just one of the things that doesn't get talked about or covered that much. It's a big part of what I call the world beneath, the underworld, but also the world that we all live in, right? The economy that we're all in are these sort of independent individuals, most of them, because there's a lot of money, that work with intelligence services and work with foreign governments, but you wouldn't call them a spy, right? It's not like that. They're just, a contractor. They're contractors. Right? Look, foreign intelligence services will pay a shit ton of money for video on a U.S. leader in business, politics, finance, in any media influence, committing a crime. And the people who sort of perfected the art of that are gangsters.
Right.
Yeah.
Helps for the shakedown.
And Jeffrey Epstein was swimming in both worlds. He really was, as was Ghislaine. She was is kind of widely acknowledged as sort of the brains of the operation, from whether it's the victims and survivors that could identify that when it comes to the girls that he was raping and trafficking, or the former foreign intelligence officers who Robert Maxwell introduced Epstein to. They all say Ghislaine was the brains of she kind of inherited her dad's business. It's certainly what her dad did. That was certainly his business. He made a lot of money licensing that Promise software to the former Soviet Union, to other nations, right? That's being an unregistered foreign agent. If he was a U.S. citizen, he was not. He was a British citizen, and it was very close with the Queen, and that's why Ghislaine grew up with Prince Andrew.
This is crazy. So as we
small little world of rarefied air.
So tying this together, and I know a lot of people are saying they're going to watch it a second time. That's great. But I want to just pull this last piece together with you. So it brings us to, given that we know Donald Trump is all over the Epstein files, because we know that from reporting, and Pam Bondi is redacting it and so on. And
we're not idiots. Yes, we can observe.
We know this. I mean, something
is being kept.
But why? So why would have is Donald Trump, when he said, "Oh, I'm gonna," when he gets elected, and MAGA is, really wanting this. Part of it is the real, and then part of it is the sort of crazy fakes conspiracy. But
Right.
so MAGA's really wanted this. They have Bongino, who thinks he's going to get it. You had Bondi coming in promising it, and then all of a sudden they back away because Donald says, "Don't do it." Was Donald always knew he was going to say no at some time? Do you think? Because why would he have ever hyped up his election based on this, knowing that he is
Listen,
through and through? Yes, go ahead.
I have a real problem when media is like, we can't get inside of his mind when he just tells you everything,
Okay, tell me.
But for this, I gotta say, as much as I've had this Donald's number from day one, because I was privy to that information and I was always following the money track, the Russian money track, and the gangster track. Who knows why he thought he could get away with it? I think, I don't know if this guy goes second by second of like, I got to survive this moment, and then I'll worry about that
promises
later.
I'll get you the tax returns, and he has no intention of doing it.
He needed to
he's
get
always
back
promising.
He needed to get back into office. So no matter what. And so making these promises and then thinking he can control it. I keep wanting to go back to the money. We can talk about the girls and the victims all day long. I don't doubt for 1 second that Jeffrey Epstein's best friend and running buddy was fully aware of what Epstein was doing. And who knows what his level of participation in it. There certainly are women who came forward and said, yes, he did. I know he raped my friend, or he raped me, or whatever. And then they all got squashed, but they went under oath. And there's that. Take that as you will, right? I can't weigh in on that. Just because I don't have any knowledge any more than anyone else does about what's public and what's there.
Right.
But what does need real digging into and looking into is, was Donald a client of Jeffrey Epstein's? Was Jeffrey Epstein also, or was Donald participating in some way in some of this flight capital that we know he was laundering from Mogilevich? Was that being pushed through Jeffrey's offshores? Was it being kept in those tax havens? What happened to those offshore companies? Did it end up going up through Towers Financial? Why was Steve Hoffenberg, Jeffrey Epstein business partner,
went to prison? Right.
Why did he get convicted and go to prison for 18 years when Jeffrey Epstein skated? What kind of deal did he cut with the Justice Department? And why can't we see that deal? Who else was involved in that money launder? Who else went in and cut a deal at that time with the Justice Department so that just one guy? Why did Steve Hoffenberg tell me that when he was out of prison, the very first person to call him before he barely even made his way home was Roger Stone?
Shut up.
Why was this so? What's going on with the money?
Right.
That's where everybody needs to stay focused. What
So
can
Ron
we learn from the
Wyden,
IRS? The tax man took down Al Capone. Right?
Yes.
Everybody knows that story. And it wasn't the guy everybody thinks it was. It was a man named Elmer Iree. I get into this in The World Beneath as well, who was head of the IRS and the head of the investigations at that time, and Elizabeth Friedman. Those are the two people who found Al Capone's network of smuggling and found his LLCs and were able to say that this is the money. You haven't paid taxes on any of this money. And that's how he's built. And that freaked out Al Capone's two business partners, one in particular, Meyer Lansky at the time, that he went over to Switzerland and started banks and created offshore banking.
Right.
Meyer Lansky created offshore banking. And they put banks all along the Caribbean and all these offshore routes, right, where they were smuggling all of their drugs and all of what was their booze that just became a big smuggling empire by the time Prohibition was overturned. So the very same places that Jeffrey Epstein went into and started his offshores.
LB, my last question then is, do you think Ron Wyden, the senator from Oregon, whose committee is deeply trying to look into this, has someone who has the kind of mind that you do, that can not only synthesize sort of the big picture, but that can also drop down the way a computer drop through menu is and remembers all these pieces. And if you're working with them, you don't have to say, but they need to be doing this.
No, nobody, no one reaches out to me. No one.
Do you want them to? Here. I could make that call.
You can make that call.
Okay.
It's all of what I'm talking about. I did have some sources. I did have people help me that knew information, and it wasn't classified or anything like that. Right. It was sort of like, look here, look there, you're on the right track, go here, go there. But everything I'm talking about is something, it's a tremendous amount of work I did, years of work finding all of these things. But it's all still there. As far as I know, I can look back. I don't think, so Wyden can go in there and say, look here, look here, look here, look here, here it all is. Here's the picture. But someone's got to have, we need at least the head of the IRS to stick in the job long enough under Donald to where, as Wyden is requesting, whatever he's requesting, we can sort of see what the hell, where it was Donald Jeffries' client.
L-O-fucking-L, because as you know, Billy Long is out of there. And guess who's acting head of the IRS? Isn't it Scott Bessent? The lying son of a bitch. Oh, yeah,
the lying guy. The guy that's he looks like a robot. Something's going on with him.
He does.
I don't know. He's a very strange person.
Let's put this last piece together. The raid this morning on Bolton was a warning shot to anyone at anywhere, DOJ, FBI, who should be speaking out. Like, this was that warning, I think. I don't know what you think.
I mean, I'm reeling from it. I literally found the news, went and brushed my teeth and put my hair in a ponytail and came on the show. So, I look, what do I think about it? I think if Matt Gaetz had been arrested the second he breached that skiff with his pizza bullshit, as Adam Schiff was in there and they were going over really critical stuff. If he had been arrested at that point in time, we wouldn't have half of the problems we have today. Really, truly.
That was Matt Gaetz. I don't remember him doing that.
He breached the skiff. Okay. Remember, he did a whole thing.
He had a
Yeah. I think if Mueller, look, you said something about Mueller that I wanted to be. He didn't find collusion. What he actually
I want to say the word. Sorry, go ahead. I'm being a lawyer. He didn't find.
We didn't not find it. Right. He did that double thing, which was.
He said. Let me just go back. Let me say it as a lawyer. He said he did not have. I should have been more precise. He did not have enough evidence of an agreement between the Trump campaign and the Russians in order to make himself feel comfortable saying that there was that agreement. But of course, he found obstruction.
That's what I was going to say. I had that in here. Literally, that's why there were 2 volumes to that report, because the obstruction piece, and why obstruction is what gangsters do, and why it needs to be really pursued as the topmost crime, is you cannot get anybody for these other crimes if there's obstruction of justice. You can't get to what.
That's what I teach. 18 USC 1503 and onward. And that's Donald Trump, one of the charges against him related to January 6th. But this was critical. And this is where, and I never can emphasize it enough, Merrick Garland fucked us over, because he should have taken the blueprint from volume 2 of the Mueller report and said, I'm going to appoint a special counsel, period, to deal with any of these things. And it was his Tylenol moment, as I wrote in the Washington Monthly, and he didn't do it. So my question for you is he just a sort of, is he just Mr. I have to follow the rules and I want to bend over backward for Republicans? Or do you think he's compromised?
Garland?
Yeah.
The only thing so this is where it's like, if I find a detail that rings a bell, I'll go and I'll follow it. And then I feel like I can come to some kind of conclusion without it being.
Because I've never with him found anything.
I don't have that with him.
Me either.
But what I can say with full confidence that Merrick Garland is a total dud. I just think he's a dud.
Yes,
he's
I
just
agree.
a dud. And I think he's got some kind of I saw a personality disorder on display. I'm not a psychologist, but when he testified and he started getting emotional over his family in the Holocaust and cried, and the whole world was like, oh my gosh. And then he manufactured that moment in these interviews over and over again. I'm like, he's crying again? He's doing this again? So there's something going on with that guy that I understand why Joe Biden thought, we're going to give him this guy, and but
because he didn't get his Supreme Court position, and he was fucking ambitious, and that's what he wanted. And it should have been
like
not him.
We all were cheering it on at the time. Oh my God, this guy. And he also, went after the Oklahoma City bombers and all this kind of stuff. So it seemed like we were going to get some justice, but justice delayed is justice denied. And he drug his feet. I don't know why he drug his feet. I think it might have been just really, the most generous thing I can say is how overwhelming it must have been. And I saw Bill Barr have this moment too, to get into the Department of Justice as Attorney General and see the evidence against this guy, Donald, and the law, and understand who he really is, and just be overwhelmed by it and freaked out and feel paralyzed. I can only, that's
Sally Yates would not have felt paralyzed, but I think,
who?
Sally Yates, who had been the acting Attorney General, she would have kicked ass. So would have Doug Jones.
Absolutely.
Anyway, I love you. You must come back. Thank you for getting up early in the morning. And I'm probably going to get Greg on to talk about dirty rubles. But, I want to collaborate more with you, and just thank you for being here
thanks,
today.
Jen. I'm always here. Thanks to your audience. Nice to see. I can see you guys in there. And then we're on live tonight. So we're at 5/8.
What time?
We're always on at, it's the 5/8. So 5 p.m. West Coast time, 8 p.m. East Coast time, every Friday night. So we're on tonight, 8 o'clock East Coast time, live on YouTube. So just go to the 5/8 YouTube channel.
So before you leave, we'll go off stage. What I'm going to be playing is a song that one of my fabulous mods, the Mod Squad, Jason Smith, created. My other Mod Squad members are Deb and AJ. So I'm going to play this, and I'm going to run an Epstein timeline. You can stick around or you can go, but I just want to thank you again. And we are out.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Jen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show. Hello, prison mates. It's the Jen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show. Hello, prison mates. It's the Jen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There is hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show. Hello, prison mates. It's the Gen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There was hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Gen Taub Show. Hello, prison mates. It's the Gen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There was hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Gen Taub